author's note: Negro, colored, Indian, girls. Though some readers might find the language of hidden figures discordant to their modern ears, I've made of every attempt to remain true to the time period and to the voices of the individuals represented in this story. Mrs. Land worked as a computer out at Langley, my father said, taking a right turn out of the parking lot of First Baptist Church in Hampton, Virginia. My husband and I visited my parents just after Christmas in 2010, enjoying a few days away from our full-time life and work in Mexico. The squires around town in their 20-year-old green minivan, my father driving, my mother in the front passenger seat, Aaron and I bucking behind like siblings. My father, gregarious as always, offered a stream of commentary that shifted fluidly from updates on the friends and neighbors we've bumped into around town to the weather forecast to elaborate discourses on the physics underlying his latest research as a 66-year-old doctoral student at Hampton University. He enjoyed touring my main born and raised husband through our neck of the woods and refreshing my connection with local life and history in the process. During our time home, I spent afternoons with my mother catching matinees at a local cinema, while Aaron tagged along with my father and his friends to Norfolk State University football games. We gorged on fried fish sandwich at the hole-in-the-wall joints near Buckaroo Beach, visit the Hampton University Museum's Native American art collection, and hunted local antiques shops. As a callow 18-year-old leaving for college, I'd see my hometown as a mere launching pad for a life in a worthier locales. A place to be rather than a place to be. But years and miles away from home could never attenuate the city's hold on my identity. And the more explored places and people far from Hampton, the more my status as one of Story came to mean to me. That day after church, we spent a long time while catching up with formidable Mrs. Land, who had been one of my favorite Sunday school teachers. Kathleen Land, a retired NASA mathematician, still lived on her own, well into her 90s, and never missed a Sunday at the church. We said our goodbyes to her and clambered into the minivan off to a family brunch. A lot of women around here, black and white, work as computers, my father said, glancing at Aaron in the rearview mirror but addressing us both. Catherine Pedro, Ophelia Taylor, Sue Wider, he said, ticking off a few more names, and Katherine Johnson, who calculated the launch windows for the first astronauts. The narrative triggered memories decades old of spending a much-treasured day off from school at my father's office at the National Aeronautics and Space Administration Langley Research Center. I rode shotgun in our 1970s Pontiac, my brother Ben and sister Lauren in the back as our fathers drove the 20 minutes from our house, straight over the Virgil I. Grissom Bridge, down Mercury Boulevard, to the road that led to the NASA gate. Daddy flashed his badge, and we sailed through the campus on a perfect straight parallel streets lined from one end to the other by a remarkable two-story red bricks building. Only the giant hypersonic wind tunnel complex, a 100-foot rich silver sphere presiding over 4 60-foot smooth silver globes, offer visual evidence of the remarkable work occurring in the otherwise ordinary-looking campus. Building 1236, my father's daily destination, contained a Byzantine complex of government-grade cubicles, perfumed with the grown-up smells of coffee and stale cigarette smoke. His engineering colleagues, with their rampant style and distracted manner, seemed like exotic birds in a sanctuary. They gave us kids stacks of discarded 11 to 14 continuous form computer paper, printed on one side with cryptic arrays of numbers, the blank side a canvas for creating masterpieces. Women occupied men of the cubicles. They answered phones and sat in front of typewriters, but also made hieroglyphic marks on transparent slides and comfort with my father and other men in the office on the stacks of documents that littered their desks. That so many of them were African American, many of them my grandmother's age, struck me as simply as part of natural order of things. Growing up in Hampton, the face of science was brown like mine. My dad joined Langley in 1964 as a co-op student and retired in 2004, an internationally respected climate scientist. 5 of my father's 7 siblings made their bones as engineers or technologists, and some of his best buddies, David Woods, Elijah Kent, Wendell Stanton, carved successful engineering careers at Langley. Our next-door neighbor taught physics at Hampton University. Our church abounded with mathematicians. Supersonic experts held leadership positions in my mother's sorority, and electrical engineers sat on the board of my parents' college alumni associations. My aunt Julia's husband, Charles Fox, was the son of Ruth Bates Harris, a career civil servant and fierce advocate for the advancement of women and minorities. In 1974, NASA appointed her deputy assistant administrator, the highest-ranking woman at the agency. The community certainly included black and English professors, like my mother, as well as black doctors and dentists, black mechanics, janitors and contractors, black cobblers, wedding planners, real estate agents and undertakers, several black lawyers, and a handful of black Mary Kay salespeople. As a child, however, I knew so many African Americans working in science, math, and engineering that I thought that's just what black folks did. My father, growing up during segregation, experienced a different reality. Become a physical education teacher, my grandmother said in 1962 to his 18-year-old son, who was hell-bent on studying electrical engineering at historically black Norfolk State College. In those days, college-educated African Americans with book smart and common sense put their ships on teaching jobs or sought work at the post office. But my father, who built his first rocket in junior high metal shop class following the Sputnik launch in 1957, defied my grandfather and plunged full steam ahead into engineering. Of course, my grandfather's fears that it would be difficult for a black man to break into engineering were unfounded. As late as 1970, just 1% of all American engineers were black, a number that doubled to a whopping 2% by 1984. Still, the federal government was the most reliable employer of African Americans in the science and technology. In 1984, 8.4% of NASA's engineers were black. NASA's African American employees learned to navigate their way through the space agency's engineering culture, and their successes in turn afforded their children previously unimaginable access to American society. Growing up with white friends and attending integrated schools, I took much of the groundwork they'd laid for granted. Every day, I watched my father put on a suit and back out of the driveway to make the 20-minute drive to Building 1236, demanding the best from himself in order to give his best to the space program and to his family. Working at Langley, my father secured my family's place in the comfortable middle class, and Langley became one of the anchors of our social life. Every summer, my siblings and I saved our allowance to buy tickets to ride ponies at the annual NASA Carnival. Year after year, I confided my Christmas list to the NASA Santa at Langley Children's Christmas Party. For years, Ben, Laurie, and my youngest sister, Jocelyn, still a toddler, sat in the bleachers of the Langley Activities Building on Thursday nights, rooting for my dad and his NBA, NASA Basketball Association team. The Stars. I was as much a product of NASA as the moon landing. The spark of curiosity soon became an all-consuming fire. I peppered my father with questions about his early days at Langley during the mid-1960s, questions I'd never asked before. The following Sunday, I interviewed Mrs. Lan about the early days of Langley's computing pool, when part of her job responsibility was knowing which bathroom was marked for colored employees. And less than a week later, I was sitting on the couch in Katherine Johnson's living room, under a framed American flag that had been to the moon, listening to a 93-year-old with a memory sharper than mine recall segregated buses. Years of teaching and raising a family, and working out the trajectory from John Glenn's space flight. I listened to Catherine Durden's stories of long years spent as a data analyst, waiting for the chance to prove herself as an engineer. Even as a professionally integrated ward, I had been the only black woman in enough drawing rooms and boardrooms to have an inkling of the chutzpah it took for an African-American woman in the segregated Southern's workplace to tell her bosses she was sure her calculations would put a man on the moon. This women path set the stage for mine. Immersing myself in their stories helped me understand my own. Even if the tale had begun and ended with the first 5 black women who went to work at Langley's segregated West Side in May 1943, the woman later known as the West Computers, I still would have committed myself to recording the facts and circumstances of their lives, just as islands, isolated places with unique, rich biodiversity, have relevance for the ecosystems everywhere. So does studying seemingly isolated or overlooked people and events from the past turn up unexpected connections and insights to modern life. The idea that black women had been recruited to work as mathematicians at the NASA installation in the South during the days of segregation defies our expectations and challenges much of what we think we know about American history. It's a great story, and that alone makes it worth telling. Espero que tenham gostado do vídeo. Se você chegou até aqui, muito obrigada por assistir. Curta o vídeo, inscreva-se no canal para receber mais conteúdos como esse. Um abraço, muita luz e fiquem com Deus.